What I have next to me is two of the most powerful electric unicycles ever made. The specs are very similar, but these wheels are very different. We will be comparing both of these side by side in detail so you can make the best possible buying decision. Or if you've already done so, you can feel vindicated and validated internally about the purchase that you already made. Let's talk about them. This is Wheel Good Time. Thanks for joining me on Wheel Good Time, where we have two of the most powerful electric unicycles ever made, the Leaperkim Lynx and the Begode ET Max. As some of you may already know, the Begode ET Max and I have a little bit of a history together already because I crashed it going 35 miles an hour from the tube suddenly deflating rapidly. So that is why the wheel is in a little bit banged up condition, but we're waiting on some parts and it should be good to go in no time. It seems that every EUC enthusiast is always chasing the ultimate adrenaline high, and with that comes power. On the Begode ET Max, we have a 168 volt system with a 4,500 watt motor. On the Leaperkim Lynx, we have a significantly smaller 3,200 watt motor and a 151 volt system. Don't let the ET Max's specs fool you though. This is a significantly heavier wheel, which also plays a major role in the comparison of the two. In terms of power, the ET Max and the Lynx both outperform each other in different ways. For the Begode ET Max, the acceleration off the line is rather sluggish. It doesn't feel like a 168 volt wheel. It feels more like a 134 volt wheel. Then on the other hand, with the Lynx, the off the line acceleration is absolutely off the charts. You're able to do burnouts pretty easily on it. It feels like a much higher voltage wheel, and that's largely due to the firmware tuning. Now, make no mistake, the ET Max being a 168 volt wheel, it can achieve that. It's a lot harder to access. The ET Max is capable of far higher top speeds. In fact, you could probably get to about 70 miles per hour of sustained riding speeds if you have the skill level for it on the ET Max. With the Lynx, you're just not able to get really anywhere close to that. However, you're still able to ride absurdly fast on the Lynx, but it starts to get a little bit sketchy, a little bit wobbly at around 45 miles an hour with the stock tire. So in essence, you're able to go and hold high speeds much better on the ET Max than you can on the Lynx. Don't get me wrong, you're able to go really fast on the Lynx, but it's just not able to sustain those speeds quite as easily as the ET Max. So in terms of acceleration, the Lynx wins hands down, but the ET Max is able to hold and sustain much higher top speeds compared to the Lynx. I firmly believe that after this video is published, Begode is going to be releasing a firmware that is going to be dramatically increasing the acceleration power on the ET Max. Because let's be honest, the ET Max is objectively far superior to the Lynx, but their firmware just isn't tuned for it very well. When it comes to braking power, the ET Max absolutely smokes the Lynx. Now, I just made a YouTube video that I was discussing the braking power on the Lynx, and I said that it had like the best braking power out of any EUC ever made. And then the ET Max comes along. I have to admit that the ET Max's braking power is absolutely breathtaking. Now, the Lynx has about as good of a braking power capability as a car would. However, the ET Max is even better than that. It's amazing. Now, why is it that they can't make it possible for a user to use that same braking power and accelerate at that same rate of speed? I think it's going to happen someday soon. Something important to note is that both companies inflate and exaggerate their speed just by a bit. With the Lynx, it's about 5%, which is pretty close to what cars do in terms of inflating their speed compared to what the speedometer says. So 5% isn't too bad. On the ET Max, we're looking at about 12 to 15%. With Begode wheels, it seems like the inflation of their numbers just keeps going up and up and up over the years to the point of just kind of getting ridiculous. So it's kind of hard to trust the speedometer that's on the wheel on the ET Max. Either way, both of these wheels have the capability to push any rider, even a professional, beyond their own personal limit. So these wheels are still far more capable than probably you are as you're watching this. Oh, by the way, Every video takes about 10 to 20 hours per 10 minutes of published video that I put on YouTube. So if you could make that time worth my while, please hit that subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. Now, let's talk about build quality. Let me just say that the Lynx and the ET Max both have outstanding build quality. Both are able to handle crashes. As you can see with the ET Max, it really was able to take a hit pretty well at 35 miles per hour. The only parts that were really damaged were the back parts here, and we have some nasty scuffs right up top here, and the trolley handle is a little bit messed up. So it really didn't take any severe internal body damage, nothing that is permanently crippling. On the Lynx, everything on this wheel is extremely well put together, just like on the ET Max. There have been people that have already crashed on the Lynx, and the wheel just takes a beating and keeps on going. It's amazing. So in terms of build quality and durability, both of these wheels are outstanding, and they both get a thumbs up. The ET Max has more of a metal build to it. There's a little bit of plastic along here, but they've got some metal battery boxes. There's just metal everywhere, and it oozes build quality. It's a heavy wheel. Whereas the Lynx, it has a very high level of fit and finish, but it does have a lot more plastic in it. That's not necessarily a bad thing because it's very high quality and high durability plastic. So I really don't have any complaints about the fact that it is a more plasticky build. Something that I did love about the Lynx is that there is a 20-point quality control inspection that is done on every single unit. Every single wheel coming out of Leaperkim's factory gets a quality control inspection. Now, on the other hand, the ET Max, it doesn't quite get the same high honors. This wheel didn't really have any quality control issues except for one, and that is that the tire wasn't inflated properly coming out of the factory. Other than that, all of the screws were Loctited down, everything was as it should be. Unfortunately, I have heard from multiple users already that for the ET Max, they are experiencing loose motor bolts and some other loose screws that really shouldn't be present. Motor bolts are absolutely critical. If one of those comes falling out during a ride, it could be a devastating thing. Being an EUC owner, you shouldn't have to take apart your wheel and ensure that every single screw is locked in the way it should be prior to riding it for the first time. This wheel should be ready to go completely out of the box, but it just isn't for some users, and that does leave a little bit of concern. When we're talking about build quality, both of these wheels get very, very high marks, and I would give them both a tie. But in terms of quality control, the Lynx takes the win. Before we move on to the next category, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, NextGen Mobility. NextGenMobility.org sent me this demo unit ET Max, and they sold me this Lynx for an outstanding price. You too can also get yourself an outstanding price at NextGenMobility.org. And of course, don't forget your coupon code WheelGoodTime. Now let's talk about waterproofing. In my recent review of the Lynx, I said that the Lynx had the best waterproofing of any EUC ever made. The reason why I said that is because it is independently IPX6 certified. And as it turns out, I was wrong. The ET Max actually is also independently IP rated, and it's rated at a higher level. The ET Max is rated at IP67 certification, which is a ridiculously awesome level of waterproofing, especially for an EUC. I'm personally a bit paranoid, so I try to avoid riding in the rain at all costs, but both of these should be able to do just fine in a total rainstorm. However, objectively, the ET Max is better waterproofed than the Lynx. Although both of these wheels have a 14-inch rim, the ET Max has a 20.4-inch tire, while the Lynx has only a 19.5-inch tire. The reason for that is because they are two different tire sizes. The ET Max has a slightly wider tire, which also increases its overall diameter. What this means for you is that the ET Max has more gyroscopic force that is happening compared to the Lynx. Another thing is that the Lynx's stock tire just doesn't generate that much gyroscopic force. With a stronger gyro effect on the ET Max, it requires a little bit more body input to turn. And you actually want that when you're going at really high rates of speed. You don't want to be just using a little tiny bit of your body and then the wheel is just a little bit too eager to turn over on its side. You don't want that. So in terms of stability, the ET Max is far superior. But at the same time, because the ET Max is so tall and this has a slightly smaller diameter tire, the Lynx is just so much more nimble. The ET Max is really heavy and the Lynx not so much. It's actually deceptively light. So the Lynx is very, very nimble. So really what it comes down to is, what do you want out of your wheel? Do you want something that is nimble and playful? Or do you want something that is a bit more boat-like, but when you hit high speeds, it's a lot more stable and reliable? The topic of suspension is a really interesting one because a really bad suspension on an otherwise awesome EUC can really ruin your ride experience. Similarly, an amazing suspension on a mediocre EUC can really elevate that experience. So let's talk about the Lynx first. With the Lynx, we have two suspension stanchions here, and it's a hydraulic style suspension. So you have your compression on this side and your rebound on this side, and all you need to do is use a flathead screwdriver to adjust it. And if you want to adjust the preload, all you have to do is use a wrench or a socket and adjust it there. With the ET Max, we have a coil type suspension here, and you're able to adjust your compression and rebound here. And also we have an air chamber, and these dials twist with a little bit of effort here. Honestly, on the ET Max here, the suspension travel distance is far superior than the Lynx. However, it is just not quite as smooth. When I pulled the Lynx out of the box, I just hopped on and the suspension was dialed in perfectly. I literally never had to adjust anything. Just out of the box, everything was smooth and plush. I loved it. Then when I got onto the ET Max, it was all right, but it does take a lot of effort to get it dialed in. And even if you do get it completely dialed into the way you want it and the way you need it, it's still not incredibly smooth. Yes, it will absorb bumps and potholes and whatever else. It just doesn't feel amazing compared to the Lynx. And that's saying something considering that it has significantly more suspension travel distance. Now, I feel the need to add that this is a 1,300-pound suspension spring, and so this is going to be for users that are a bit heavier. However, Begode has since released a 900-pound suspension on this, which is dramatically better. How do I know this? I got to try one. It was game-changing. It was really, really smooth and really nice. Now, it's still not as game-changing and nice as the Lynx, but it was so much more comfortable. And so personally, unless you are over 250 pounds, I would recommend sticking with the 900-pound suspension for the ET Max if you choose to get one. Now let's talk about pedals. On the ET Max, we have these beautiful spiked pedals, and these are a significant improvement over the pedals that have been seen in previous models on Begode EUCs. They are CNC cut, I believe, and they're just absolutely really nice. They are very strong, they have actual spikes, and they have plenty of them. They are just really good pedals. The Lynx, on the other hand, has these pedals. They are pretty lightweight, and they have big old holes in them, so they cut down on the weight, but they just are not that awesome. As you can see, we have these little nubs here. They're not even spikes, they're just bumps, and they don't really keep your foot in there very well. So I would say that the pedals on the Lynx are one of its biggest flaws. It's just not very good. And for that reason, I recommend pedals like E-Ride's pedals. These are the ones that I use. They are absolutely amazing. The thing that I like about them is that they also have these really grippy, real spikes here and loads of them all over the place that keep your foot locked in. But then on top of that, we have these heel and toe risers, which really keep your foot locked in place. Having it in a concave shape really keeps your foot locked in and it keeps it from moving. And when you're moving at high speeds, you really, really want your foot to be locked in. Furthermore, you can't adjust the pedal height on the Lynx. That's a really frustrating and irritating thing considering it's 2024 and these wheels are really expensive. So I got a pedal lowering kit from E-Rides and I really like it. It increases the stability and it just increases your feeling of being planted, and I highly recommend it. Now, the ET Max is significantly better in this regard. Not only do they have decent pedals, but they also have the ability to raise and lower your pedals to whatever pedal height you prefer. You can lower it all the way, which to me, I felt like it was just way, way too low. But if that's the way you want to do it, then power to you, especially for super tall people. But the ET Max is far superior because of having decent pedals and having adjustable pedal height. In the pedal department, the ET Max takes a big win in this category. It just seems like Leaperkim didn't even show up to the game when it comes to the pedals. All EUC maintenance is general DIY. And for that reason, these wheels need to be able to be maintained by the average person. Like our previous category, ease of maintenance has a very clear winner. With the ET Max, it is what nightmares are made of. We have nothing but screws everywhere all around here. And they're small screws. I really don't understand the design decision when it comes to all of the screws that are put onto the ET Max. But it is just a very laborious process when it comes to pulling apart the ET Max. It's not necessarily a hard to work on, it's just very long to work on. And being that they're very small screws and tons of them, that dramatically increases your risk of stripping out screws, which I may or may not have done myself. Furthermore, there is a plate that goes in between the battery boxes here, which is a really welcome addition, but they had to secure this on there with 18 screws per side just to secure this on. When it comes to the kickstand, in order to take that off, it is 5 screws on each side to remove this thing. Yeah, there's a lot of screws involved, and that does make it look nice. It makes it have a nice, clean look to it, but it's just not that awesome when it comes to ease of maintenance. It takes a long time to pull it apart. Now, in contrast, the Lynx has not that many screws, and they are in obvious places. It's easy to work on. Now, people have said for a long time that the older Leaperkim wheels are a lot harder to work on, but with the Lynx, it is just so much better. Even though it doesn't look quite as polished to have all these large screws sticking out all over the place, I don't think it looks that bad, and honestly, it's way, way easier to work on and access these, and you're running a lot lower risk of stripping out screws, which is a much bigger deal to me than aesthetics. So in conclusion of the ease of maintenance category, the Lynx absolutely blows the ET Max out of the water. You're going to be spending a lot less time working on your Lynx than you will be on your ET Max. Now let's discuss the trolley handles. On the ET Max, it folds out like this and comes to this position, and it doesn't lock out. It just kind of comes up and down. So it's not the most comfortable considering you're just grabbing metal here. It's not terrible. It's just kind of weird. And I do like the fact that it folds flush. However, it does get in the way of trying to put in a seat on here. You should be able to put a seat on here. There's no excuse for not being able to put a third-party seat on here because it is so slick. But we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. On the Lynx, the trolley handle is located in the rear. You press a button and it pops up. It comes locking in the upright position, but it is just a bit floppy. It makes a little bit of noise when you're jiggling it around. It's just not very high quality. I was not a fan of it. I do like the positioning of it. I do like just the feel of the handle. It's very nice. Although plasticky, it's nice. But it's just overall a bit of a low build quality thing, and they could have improved the fit and finish on the trolley handle for the Lynx. But between the two of them, since the Lynx makes it possible for you to put on a seat without interfering with the trolley handle, I have to reluctantly give the win in the trolley handle category to the Lynx. Let's talk about the lighting on these. On the ET Max, we have 4 bulbs here, and they are fairly dim, let's be honest. I believe they're the same type of headlights that the EX30 uses. And when you get moving, the lights get brighter, and I think that's a nice feature. Also, you hit the button one more time and it flashes, and I think that's a really nice feature, especially when operating during the daytime. It increases your visibility by having the flashing. When it comes to taillights, the ET Max is very dim. In bright daylight, the taillight is completely invisible, and it's partially due to the fact that we have this smoke-colored seat here, that it looks really nice, but I want people to be able to see the lighting on my wheel, and I want them to know that I'm braking if necessary. So this is an important issue here that I just can't really get behind the design decision for Begode with the taillights here. With the Lynx, we have a dual beam headlight that is extremely bright. In fact, I would say this is one of the brightest EUC headlights ever made, and I really like the fact that it is adjustable at the angle, and it's just phenomenal. It's also modular, so if you don't like it and you want to switch to something else, all you have to do is pop out the 2 screws that hold it here, and then you can disconnect it with a 3.5 millimeter cable, and away you go. You can swap it out for something that you like better. With the taillights, we have these 2 very, very bright taillights that get even brighter when you're braking. It is just ridiculously bright, even during broad daylight. I really, really love the taillights on the Lynx. Unfortunately, it is kind of obstructed a little bit with the carry handles in the back, but I'm able to forgive it just because you're able to see it on both sides. It's not too bad. Overall, I have really no complaints about the lighting on the Lynx, and I have nothing but complaints about the lighting on the ET Max. The ET Max isn't absolutely horrible, but I would say it's mediocre at best compared to the Lynx's lighting, which absolutely knocks it out of the park. These 2 EUCs are very, very different. They ride very different. Just because they have somewhat similar specs doesn't mean that they are going to be direct competitors. They're released roughly around the same time, but they just ride so much differently. The Lynx rides much more similarly to a Begode Master than the ET Max does. And the ET Max, I would equate it much more in the ride feel department, very close to a Master Pro. So if you've ridden either one of those wheels, then I think you're going to feel right at home with one of these others here, which is a bit more comparable. With the Lynx, your use cases are going to be in the realm of up to extreme off-roading, some high-speed road riding, and it's kind of a do-it-all sort of wheel. It's very, very versatile. The ET Max, on the other hand, is more of a niche wheel. It is an outstanding race wheel, I believe, and it's only going to be getting better when they release different firmware for it. This thing is made for the street, and this one is made for almost everything, but it's just not quite as good at the street riding that the ET Max is, because it is purpose-built for the street. On the racetrack, I think that both of these wheels have their home there. Now, the ET Max is going to be much better at the long straightaways, such as Apple Valley Speedway, something where it has a chance to really hit those ridiculous top speeds of 60 plus miles an hour for those extra crazy riders. Now, with the Lynx, it is much better at those really tight turns because you're able to accelerate right out after that turn at a ridiculously high rate of speed. So the ET Max certainly has its place on the racetrack, and I think that they are going to excel in different areas. And one more thing, from what I've heard, Begode has a firmware update that is not yet available to the public, but it dramatically increases the low-end torque. So whenever that's released to the public, for all we know, the ET Max very well could just absolutely crush the Lynx in terms of the torque. Because honestly, it is objectively superior because of the stats. The only reason why the Lynx is so much better in so many ways is not just the suspension, but also the firmware programming. So once Begode dials it in, it very well could be head and shoulders better than the Lynx in terms of the power when it comes to racing. I'm not going to say which EUC is better than the other because everyone has their own particular use cases, and someone may value X category over Y category. They're just very different wheels. So that's what the comment section is for. That's for you guys to battle it out in the comment section. But before you go and before you do that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.